Tired? I bet you are. Good morning. As we look at Mary Magdalene at the tomb, we're going to start in Mark chapter 15. We're going to go into chapter 16, but we're going to spend most of our time in the Gospel of John, chapter 20. So we're going to start here in Mark 15. So far in our study of the post-resurrection appearances, none of them have actually been appearances. This is the first one. So I kind of put them in there under that title. 2 weeks ago, we saw the women go to the tomb. Did they actually see the resurrected Lord? No. What did they see? An empty tomb. And then they went and reported to the disciples, including the apostles. And two of them said, well, we got to go take a look. And that's what we studied last week. Who were the two apostles who went and took a look? Peter and John. As he's called in John 20, he's the beloved disciple. And we understand that to be the Apostle John. Well, here in John 20, we'll get to in a minute, we're going to see an actual appearance. And I'm so excited. This is my favorite post-resurrection appearance. Now, I know for a lot of you, you're going to say, well, my favorite is the road to Emmaus. And we're going to look at that next week in Luke 24. I just want to point out to you that Mary is most definitely one of Jesus' loyal disciples. She was at his death, she was at his burial, and she is a witness to his resurrection. She was there. That Friday, when Jesus is dead, you can see that she is one of the women who is among several, not all of them are named, but in Mark 15, verse 40, they see Jesus dead, being taken down from the cross, and then buried. So verse 40 identifies her. Verse 47 specifically identifies her as one of the women who saw where Jesus was laid, in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. Then, the next time we see them at the tomb, it's Mary Magdalene. So she's mentioned in verse 40, verse 47, and then in chapter 16, verse 1. This is a very loyal disciple of Jesus. We know something about her from Luke's account, that she had 7 demons cast out of her. No doubt she's extremely appreciative of Jesus. On that first day of the week, when they went to the tomb, what were they worried about? What were the women worried about? How they're going to get in because of the stone. It's got to be moved out of the way. And they were coming to witness Jesus rise from the dead. Now, they were there to properly bury him with the spices out of reverence and deep respect for him. All right, we're talking about Mary Magdalene. She is one of several, and I've already shown you this chart before. She wasn't the only one who was at the tomb. There were several women here, quite a few, and we talked about that. Why do we call her Mary Magdalene? Well, she's from Magdala, which is one of those little villages around the Sea of Galilee where Jesus spent so much of his time preaching. You know, Bethsaida, Capernaum, many of those places all around the Sea of Galilee. There are trade routes that run through these, and that's, I think, a big part of Jesus' strategy, because as the Gospels end and the book of Acts picks up, you've already got people all over the area, the known world, who have heard about this incredible miracle worker who was crucified. And so they've heard about Jesus. Exactly. Mary, Mary, Mary. There are a lot of Marys. That's just a very common name. Miriam is what it's from in the Old Testament. Miriam, Mary. And we call her Mary Magdalene simply because she was from Magdala. All right, let's take a look in Mark 16. We're going to read verses 9 through 11. Mark 16, 9 through 11 says, "Now when he rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons." So there it is. "She went and told those who had been with him as they mourned and wept. But when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they went, 'Yay!'" Oh, that's not what it says. They would not believe her. Why not? Well, he was dead, but hadn't Jesus said at least 3 times during his ministry, "I'm going to die, but then rise from the dead"? Okay, they refused. It just didn't fit, and we've talked about this in our classes the last few weeks. It just didn't fit with their worldview. They refused to believe that Jesus would die, and then once he's dead, they gave up all hope. Now, what was just mentioned here is she's also a woman. What were you going to say? Right, on the last day. I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to think if we were all there, if we were one of Jesus' disciples, we'd be waiting at the tomb for him to come out. We'd be right there waiting. But the reality is we probably would have been just like these fellas, eaten up with discouragement. This comment that is made here, having 7 demons cast out of her, does that in some way affect her credibility in the minds of the disciples? I mean, who lets a demon inside of them? Obviously, and this is speculation, obviously Mary's not the best person in the world. In fact, what do people who don't read the Bible or who speculate, what do they say had been her occupation? Prostitute. Is that based on Scripture? No. There's no reason to believe necessarily that Mary Magdalene was a bad person. But she most definitely was appreciative of the fact and extremely loyal to Jesus, and perhaps that helps explain why, because of the demons that had been cast out of her. This is a good woman who loves Jesus, just like all these other women. Mary Magdalene, it's in Luke's account, Luke 8, verse 2, where it says she had 7 demons gone out, and mentions her in connection with several other women. Of course. When Jesus came to the earth, he associated with sinners. And the criticism from the Pharisees was, he's eating with sinners. And what did Jesus say in response? I came to seek and to save that which is lost. I came to heal those who are sick. A physician does not heal those who aren't sick, but those who need a physician, that's who he heals. The irony in that statement was the religious leaders who were criticizing Jesus were sick, and they just didn't know it. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in my sermon, as a matter of fact. Jesus loved all people, didn't love the sin, and we don't. This is speculation on our part that she was an especially vile sinner. I like to think she wasn't, because I like Mary Magdalene. Okay. Okay. Good point. Okay, so what Laverne's saying is, it doesn't matter if it was a guy or a gal or what. They still wouldn't have believed it. I think that's an excellent observation. Yes, sir.
To reinforce that thought, Thomas had at least 10.
All right. So you're talking about Thomas, doubting Thomas, as we call him, and we will get to that in a couple of weeks. And I'm going to point out then, and I'll mention this now, what Thomas wanted to see is exactly what the apostles also got to see. So in a way, he's no different than they are. We give him bad rap, and we'll talk about that. Maybe instead of doubting Thomas, we should call him, I want to double check Thomas, or something like that. I don't know. Okay, there you go. 2 on the road to Emmaus. Were they 2 guys? We'll talk about this next week. It could have been his wife or a female, just not named. Okay, I don't want to mention all that now. I want to focus on John 20. Let's go over to John chapter 20. We see in verses 1 through 10 Mary coming to the tomb, it tells us, running to Simon and Peter and the other disciples and saying, he's been raised. How does this jive? You know, what you have is 4 accounts. We have 4 accounts of Jesus' work and ministry. And especially when we come to the resurrection, it gets messy with all these different appearances and all these different scenes. And one doesn't even mention, John doesn't even mention all the women. And so it leaves us wondering, well, wait a minute. If all the women went to the tomb and then they went to the disciples, why is Mary by herself? What do you think the explanation is? All the women go to the tomb, including Mary. And then a bunch of those women, they go to the disciples and they don't believe them. Okay. Okay. Just singling her out, perhaps. Maybe she stayed behind. Maybe all the other women left. It doesn't have to say, but Mary stayed. So I don't know exactly what it is, but the focus is definitely on Mary Magdalene. Okay. She's the one who spoke. And it could be that she went and then went back. We're just not told. But here is the first official post-resurrection appearance. And I want to read it. We'll start reading in verse 11 of John 20. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she went, she stooped to look into the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. And I'm going to stop there for right now. This is a very tender, beautiful scene. Mary is there, whether she's by herself at this point or just simply being singled out. We see that she is at the tomb and she's weeping. Peter and John, the 2 disciples, they just come in and then left. And Mary's still there, weeping, crying, because this is so confusing. I got all these spices. I'm supposed to be taking care of his body, but his body's not here. Is Mary thinking, oh boy, he's been raised from the dead. It really happened. Well, no. Her focus is on where is the body. And what it says is that she stooped to look into the tomb. Anybody have a different verb there in verse 11? Well, what does it mean to stoop? Is she going into the tomb? Yeah, she's just kind of looking in there. Why is she doing that? Is she afraid to go in? Is she a little nervous about all this? But she's stooping. Okay. And you remember earlier, the other disciple went to the mouth of the tomb, stood there, and then Peter finally caught up. He gets in there, and then he just charges right in. And here is Mary outside the whole time. And she stoops to look into the tomb. What does she see? 2 angels. Now, sometimes in the gospel accounts it'll say 2 men, but they're also identified. Of course, those men had bright clothing on. They had white clothing, and it's apparent to us they're angels, and then they're clearly identified here in passages like this. There are 2 angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain. So there's this hewn stone slab, and that's where the body is placed. And we've talked about this gross reality a couple of times. What they would do, what the Jews would do, is wrap the body up and let it decay for a few months, then go back in once the flesh is gone, and then take those bones and put them in a bone box It's called an ossuary, and that's where they were, so that they could have more people in a single tomb, especially one like this. Joseph of Arimathea, a rich, wealthy, powerful member of the Sanhedrin, who just happens to disagree with what's happened. He was one of the ones that did not approve of Jesus' death, we are told. All right, what's going on here? What's the significance of the angels sitting where the body of Jesus was laying, one at the head and one at the feet? Well, is that a big deal? Now, this is what we're doing at the end of our year-long study of the life of Jesus. We had 6 months, took a 6-month break. Here we are at the end of 6 months. We're almost near the end of May. Just got a few more sessions left. We're taking a close, careful look at these delightful, beautiful post-resurrection appearances. Is there something significant going on here in verse 12, do you think?
There could be symbolism of the Ark of the Covenant.
Did you look at my slides, Dad? Oh, well, there you go. Would John really do that in his gospel? Give us some symbolism like this that we as good Bible students should be able to recognize? You bet. It's all over. Really all the books. But John's gospel has a lot of symbolic language. Well, I shouldn't say symbolic, but double entendre. It refers, it makes allusions back to the Old Testament. I think this is one of them. What John is doing is writing his gospel so that we will believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And this is one more way he is letting us know this Jesus is God. Who is it that would appear, that would sit on this slab of gold between the two cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant? God the Father. When the high priest would go into the most holy place once a year, God would appear there. And so he had to offer that incense that would create this barrier of sorts between him and God. He couldn't look at God. He would offer the blood of a bull for himself, for his own sins, and then come out of the most holy place and come back with the blood of a goat. You know, there were two goats. One was the scapegoat that was let into the wilderness, carrying the sins of the people. And the other goat, the blood of that goat was sprinkled on the ark, where God actually appeared. And on the Day of Atonement, once a year, the people would fast for their sins, and all the sins of the camp would be removed. That's what Jesus did for us, except he doesn't do it once a year, does he? He did it once for all time, as the Hebrew writer emphasizes in Hebrews 9 and 10. God would appear between the two cherubim. What's a cherubim? An angel. We have a couple of terms used in Scripture. There's the cherubim and the seraphim. You remember the cherubim that were at the entrance of the Garden of Eden with the flaming swords? Or I guess it was just one. It was just one cherub. And you see this term used in Isaiah 6, cherubim and seraphim. It's obvious these are mighty, powerful angels. And so that's all that means. The two cherubim that are carved out of pure gold, and they are on this slab, this mercy seat. We could spend a whole class, several classes, just on that slab of gold called the mercy seat, where God appears and our sins are removed. Well, you got an angel on one side, you got an angel on the other, and that seems to fit extremely well with the description given to us in John 20, verse 12. There's an angel just sitting there on one side where Jesus' feet had been, and the other where his head had been. What do you think of that? It is inspiring. It's one of the reasons why I love this post-resurrection appearance so much. It is powerful, and we must not miss the symbolism. Well, what's Mary worried about? Does she look at that and go, that's a representation of the Ark of the Covenant. No, it doesn't seem that she does that. She just sees two scary looking guys in white clothing sitting there, and she's going, what? Somebody took him. And what do they ask her? Why are you weeping? Now, do you think they're saying, woman, why are you weeping? That's kind of an unfortunate translation. Even when Jesus in John 2 says to his mother, woman, what do we have to do with this? This isn't a term of disrespect at all. This is, ma'am, something equivalent like that. Ma'am, why are you weeping? And what is her answer? My Lord. They have taken away my Lord. And I don't know where they've laid him. Tell me about Mary. What is she feeling right now? Think of all the emotions going through her. Grief? Remorse. Why do you say remorse?
It's like a bittersweet thing.
Okay. Seem to understand, yeah. You ever lost your keys and you kind of barter with yourself? Maybe no one else does this, but I do. I kind of say, I will never lose my keys again, I promise. And you have this feeling in the pit of your stomach, I gotta find my keys, I can't find them. And then you find them in a pair of pants from yesterday or something. Mary, that pit of her stomach feeling, no doubt, saying, I just want to find his body. Where's his body? Just give me his body, please.
Well, she started the day on a mission to do those things that she needed to.
Yeah. Right. What have you done with the body? She's on a mission. Her mission is being thwarted. She doesn't understand. She's confused. That's verse 13. Remember this question, woman, why are you weeping? That's what the disciples asked. Well, then she turns around and saw Jesus standing. Why did she suddenly turn around? What does the text say? It doesn't tell us. But what do you think probably happened here? She's looking at these two guys, confused, a little frustrated, filled with grief, and then she suddenly turns around. Okay, now hold on. She's turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Has he spoken to her yet? According to this narrative, he hasn't. Now that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, and you're exactly right. He is going to speak to her. Maybe she heard him. Maybe she sensed his presence. Maybe she heard somebody walking up. I'm just slowing down, looking at it so we can see what's going on here. Jesus said to her, somebody say something? Yes. Okay, but here's the thing. It's Jesus. And when she turns around and sees him standing, so he's not lying anywhere, he's standing, but then look at this. She did not know it was Jesus. Well, why not? Oh, her eyes are all puffy and full of tears, and she's just so confused. She just wants to find the body. The body. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Can't be him because he's dead. Isn't this fun? Just kind of looking at verse by verse, phrase by phrase. Couldn't do that in a study. We'd be spending 10 years in the Gospels. But here we are looking very carefully at this beautiful, precious post-resurrection appearance. She doesn't know it's Jesus. Do you remember on the road to Emmaus that there were two disciples who were mourning the death of Jesus, and Jesus comes walking up next to them, and they go, Jesus! No, they were, Luke's account says that their eyes, I'm forgetting the phrase exactly, but their eyes were hidden they from recognizing him. Maybe that's what's going on here as well, that Mary, just like the two on the road to Emmaus, were being prevented from recognizing him. Maybe it's dark, or maybe the shadow is on him. John doesn't give us a lot of detail there. Maybe she sees somebody wearing a robe, and she can't make out who it is. But he speaks to her now. Let's see what he says. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Does that question sound familiar? That's exactly what the angels had asked her. The angels have asked her, "Why are you weeping?" Jesus has now asked her, "Why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" That's a probing question. Whom are you seeking? At this point, who is Mary seeking? She's seeking the dead Lord Jesus. What is she going to find, though? The risen Lord Jesus. What do you mean by nothing? Oh, okay. She's not going to find anything dead. Okay. Let's keep reading. Let's go back here. Verse 14 says, after Jesus, verse 13. I need to finish verse 13. I have that up here, right? Nope, I didn't put it on the screen. So I'll just leave this up here. Let's read verses 13 through 18. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" the angels asked. She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, ma'am, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Now listen to this. Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And Jesus said, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her. All right, Jesus spoke to her, and she didn't recognize his face or his appearance. She didn't recognize the tone of his voice. I mean, I'm sure you've all experienced this. You hear somebody on the radio, some celebrity, and maybe it's a commercial. They don't identify themselves. I'm Matthew McConaughey, and let me tell you about this car. But you recognize the voice. You instantly know who that person is by the sound of their voice. Why didn't Mary recognize the sound of her Lord's voice? That's a question I'd like to know the answer to. Is Jesus going, "Woman, who are you seeking?" Is Jesus maybe hiding his voice? Okay, a lot of her emotions. But they were prevented. The text actually says they were prevented. Why is it then, when he says, "Mary," that she suddenly goes, "It's you. Jesus, it's you." What is it that made her suddenly recognize him when he said her name? You got her attention. Okay. Okay, so she's assuming this is the gardener. That's a distraction to her. But when the gardener knows her name, or is it how he said it? Because you heard how I read it, right? It's like, "Mary." That's how he said it. I don't know. Whatever it is, he says her name, and then she goes, Jesus. And I just think that's so powerful, so beautiful. Just one little word. And everything falls away. All of her grief, all of her, well, I wouldn't say all of her confusion. It could still be confusing. How is this possible? And there he is. And she responds by saying Rabboni, which is the term that's often used to describe Jesus. And it's being translated for us. The term just teacher. And that this is perhaps a term of endearment coming from her lips, but Jesus was often called by his disciples rabbi. Rabboni would be the more complete, unabbreviated form. It's just the same word. Well, she thought she was conversing with the gardener. All right. The language we were talking about earlier was reminiscent of the Ark of the Covenant. We suggested this is probably what John's conveying to us. This term, the gardener, when you go from the Hebrew Old Testament to the Greek Old Testament, and then you have the Greek New Testament, I would like to be able to tell you that this is the same term that is used, or some etymologically connected term, that describes Adam as the keeper of the garden. Gardener, keeper of the garden. It's not. But I want you to think for a moment, is it possible that John is continuing the symbolism and he is talking here about Jesus as the keeper of the new Garden of Eden? And so John is telling us, well, she thought he was the gardener, and actually he is the gardener. He is the one who is the keeper, the guardian, the protector of our entrance to God, of our being able to be in the presence of God. I don't know. I don't think I put that in the book because I really can't say that definitively at all. Something to think about. Why the gardener? He's just the guy who's being paid to take care of the grounds. I don't know. But what gets her attention is when Jesus simply says her name. And then she recognizes him. Maybe it's just simply, why would a gardener know my name? Or maybe it's more than that. The way he said her name. Yes, ma'am. Right. And now that he said her name, she's starting to say, now I do recognize the voice. I just find it strange that she didn't recognize the voice. And I think, just like in Luke 24, the road on Emmaus, the two on the road, were prevented from seeing Jesus, and then they were allowed to recognize him. I think that may be going on. John just doesn't tell us, doesn't use that same kind of language. In verse 17, this is a verse that has brought so much speculation to scholars, biblical scholars. What does this mean? And I'm going to give you a simple interpretation. But Jesus said to her, do not cling to me. Maybe she has fallen and is embracing him. It doesn't say that, though. But Jesus says, do not cling to me because I have not yet ascended to the Father. And some have said, well, maybe there's some sort of mystical presence to Jesus. He's some sort of mystical spirit at this point. Text doesn't say that either. What do you think's going on here? And hold on to him and keep him. But what's going to happen in 40 days from now? He's gone. He's gone. And then listen, I think that's all it is. He's just saying, look, you can't hold on to me. You can't keep me here. I know you're excited to see me, but I can't say. I have not yet ascended. I am ascending. So I haven't yet ascended. I am ascending. I don't think there's anything mystical or about this at all. In fact, Jesus makes that point. The Jewish people had this idea that when somebody dies, their spirit would dwell around for a little while, but that means their spirit's around. They can't eat. They can't drink. What did Jesus do when he saw his disciples? Hey, give me some of that fish. Or actually, he had some fish for them later. But on that day, when he sees them in later in John 20. He says, let's eat. Let me show you. This is me. I'm real. So that's important. But then what we also see is her saying to Mary, I want you to go back to the disciples and go back to my brothers. Has Jesus ever used that kind of language in the Gospels up to this point, chronologically, in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? Has Jesus ever referred to the apostles as his brothers? The answer to that is no. He refers to them as his disciples, as his, he's the master. Ma'am? Okay, he's also going to call them his friends. Now, Jesus did say in John 15, whoever does my commandments is my friend. And so but now he's going to call them his brothers. And then he makes a distinction, though. He says, my Father and your Father. Jesus never says, in talking about all of us, our Father. And I find that interesting. I'm not sure exactly why, except that Jesus has a very special, unique relationship with the Father. He is the Son of God. We are the adopted sons and daughters of God. Maybe that's what's going on here. But what he says is, I want you to go back and I haven't yet ascended to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Yes, sir.
To me, this statement is kind of the gospel in a nutshell.
It's the gospel in a nutshell.
Because Jesus in his ministry was
Right. That's right. You know, in the model prayer, Jesus said, this is how you should pray, our Father who is in heaven. And we studied that prayer recently on a Wednesday night, and we said, this is not Jesus' prayer. You know, he prays for the forgiveness of sins. Jesus obviously isn't equating that prayer with himself. Our Father, that's how we should pray. He is our Father. And my understanding is that's not a term that the religious leaders promoted and said the people need to do that. You need to call God your Father. There are a handful of passages in the Old Testament where God is addressed as Father, but very few. Normally it's Lord. That's the most common term. Our God, the Almighty, something like that, but not very often as Father. And then Jesus comes on the scene and says, let me tell you about my Father. Let me tell you about your Father. And now he is saying something really special. Does this mean Jesus is our brother? Go to my brothers and say to them. That this is new language. Jesus has not said that exactly. Maybe it's just not recorded. Go and tell my brothers, Matthew 28, verse 10. I will tell of your name to my brothers. That's from Psalm 22, and it's quoted and applied to Jesus in Hebrews 2, how he became one of us. He is our brother. There's this song that we sing. It's in our books. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. And the third verse talks about God our Father, Christ our brother. I've been with a church years and years ago now where there was one particular member. He had other strange views too, but he was mad that anyone would dare suggest Jesus is our brother. That's blasphemous. Well, why can't Jesus be our God and our brother all at the same time? He is the Son of God, the unique Son of God. But what are we? We are sons and daughters of God. In the same way Jesus is? Well, no. And I think that's also something we need to see in these passages. Okay, we're priests. He's the high priest. And the list could go on and on. Here's some other passages. He had to be made like his brothers in every respect. He became human. That's part of that passage in Hebrews 2. Talking about our adoption as sons. God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law so that we might receive adoption as sons. We're not the sons and daughters of God, just like Jesus is. And we have been adopted. And there are many passages that describe this adoption and the benefits of us being called children of God. And so we are. And we will see God as he is. That's a point I wanted to make from this beautiful post-resurrection appearance. Taking us back to John 17, You have the statement, my Father and your Father, my God and your God. And you remember what we're going to see in a couple of weeks. Thomas, when he sees the resurrected Lord, recognizes him, he says, my Lord and my God. That is the first time such a confession has been made in the Gospel of John by one of the disciples. They call Jesus Lord. They call him Rabbi. They call him the Christ. But they take it a new level when they see the resurrected Jesus and say, my God. There's a religious organization, maybe I should save this for them and I'll mention it now. The Jehovah's Witnesses, who deny that Jesus is the uncreated God. They want to suggest he is a created being. That's part of their doctrine, because then we can become gods too. If Jesus was created and made a God, we say that's blasphemy. This is how they explain in their commentary on John 20, verse 28. Thomas says to Jesus, my Lord. Oh, my Lord, you're resurrected. And then he looks up to heaven and says, my God. That's not what the text says. Thomas is confessing Jesus to be his God. That's what Jesus is saying. You are now in fellowship with me. We are brothers and sisters in Christ. All right, we'll finish this. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord. Who has said this since the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus? How many people? No one is able to say this. Not even the women, the group of women. Yes, ma'am. Say that again. We're almost done. Okay. So what are you saying is amiss? Okay. I don't understand. Okay. Somebody's going to have to explain it to me. But I appreciate it. I have seen the Lord. Who else could say that? Mary is the first person to see the resurrected Lord. A woman? Isn't this a beautiful little story? A scene that has so much in it. It's so beautiful. It's so powerful. Although I know a lot of you are going to say, no, that's great. That's wonderful. But my favorite is the road to Emmaus. And that's what we're going to look at next week. I've got a couple pages out in the foyer for you to look over. You can read the book. Luke 24. That's where we're going to be. We're going to be camping out in Luke 24 next Sunday. Thank you so much for your participation this morning.